The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
Hi, everybody, and a very pleasant good evening to you wherever you may be. This is Comfortably Zoned Radio, and it's time for Dodgers baseball, a tale of two cities from Brooklyn to Los Angeles. My name is Peter Trunk, and with me is Fred Walin. Fred, how you doing?
I'm doing fine. It's a little cooler here tonight here in Southern California as we tape the show on Wednesday evening.
Well, you know what? When you say it's a little cooler, I don't know whether that means instead of being 107, it's only 99. What's the temperature?
About 93. The problem is, when I was growing up, we didn't have this kind of humidity, and now we do. And anybody who says that climate change is not for real is on heavy drugs because of something to the atmosphere. And I'm sure it's this way around the world, and we just have to wake up to that fact.
Yeah, it's that's another show, but the flat earthers are really just incredible, those people. Absolutely incredible. I want to talk tonight about a guy that I've always been intrigued with. I always admired him from afar, and you actually know him. And before I knew that you knew him, I had planned to do this show. And then when I found out that you knew him, I was ecstatic because I said, oh, man, this is great. Fred knows the guy. And I'm talking about former Dodger general manager Fred Clare. And I'd like to hear some background on how you met him, when you met him, how you know, how'd you get to know him and stuff like that. If you would be so kind as to fill me in on that.
Well, Fred started as a writer here in Southern California.
He did, right.
Long Beach papers and Southern California papers, and then he got his shot as assistant PR, and then he became the general manager. And he is a very kind, nice man, always has been to me, and that's all you can judge people on. And I'll be honest with you, let's forget the 88 thing just for a moment. When Peter O'Malley had to sell the team in '98 for tax purposes, he sold it to Fox. And then Fox goes out and makes a trade, the social trade, the worst trade in a lot of people think in Dodger history. And
right.
The point is they didn't even ask Fred Clare, so he resigned. A lot of people wouldn't have resigned; they would have accepted the money and just shut up. But he didn't think it was right. Most of us didn't think it was right, and so he retired. I mean, he resigned from the Dodger general manager job. But '88 was indeed a weird season. I'm doing Dodger talk, and I'm doing sports talk on KBC and the Dodger Network, and with Stu Nahan. And Stu was a wonderful guy, but Stu loved to love the players, and I have a tendency to be objective. So sometimes we had a couple problems with objectivity, not wanting what the players wanted to hear. So they tried to get me fired. And Fred Clare and Peter O'Malley and Dodger general manager George Green, KBC general manager George Green came to my defense. So I wasn't fired. But some of the players did not like what I said.
Well, give me a for instance on what you said. I mean, how could you? I mean, wasn't it your job to be objective? Isn't that the whole reason you're on the air?
Well, no. I mean, if you're working for a radio station that makes millions of dollars from football, basketball, or baseball, hockey club, or something, you can be objective, but not really. You got to bend it a little bit. And let me just give you an example. And Kirk Gibson.
Okay.
Kirk Gibson did not try to get me fired. He wasn't one of the ones that did. But late in the season, like in maybe July, the Dodgers lost their center fielder to an injury, and somebody called up and they said, couldn't Kirk Gibson move over from left to play center? So if anybody remembers, Kirk Gibson was a fine wide receiver at Michigan State, but he had hurt his left arm. So the one thing he couldn't do was throw. So, okay, so I have to say the truth, but this is how I had to say it. You know, I said like almost verbatim. Okay, listen, Gibson's great in the clubhouse. He'll catch anything he gets to. He'll catch anything he can reach. He's a power hitter. The players love him. He'll come through in the clutch. And I went through another 3 or 4. Then I said, but the one thing he can't do is throw. The Dodgers cannot win that division. And again, at that point, Cincinnati was the biggest Dodger threat in that division.
Right.
He can't win that division if Kirk Gibson is playing center field. So the next day, I come, usually come 3:30 or 4 o'clock for batting practice. And Kenny Gurnick, who now writes for MLB.com, then wrote for the Herald Examiner here in Southern California, said, "You better not go in the clubhouse." And I said, "Why? Gibson's going to kill you." And I said, "Why is he going to kill me?" He says, "You said he couldn't play center field." And I said, "Well, he can't." And so I went in the clubhouse, and he said, "What'd you say?" He was not really mean, but sort of kidding, but not kidding. And I said, I just repeated to him what I said to you just now and what I said on the air. So what
right.
The point is, Peter, athletes, players, really very seldom ever hear what you say because they're still taking showers as you're doing the show, and they're just hearing from a friend, and all the friend heard was, "No, we can't play center field."
Right.
And the friend didn't hear the first 9 things that I said.
No nuance whatsoever. Right, I get it.
Yeah, and so that's a problem. I mean, when I left KBC, over $5,000, which was because I was promised that, and so I stood on principle like an idiot. But anyway, the point is, a couple years later, I got a letter from Peter O'Malley thanking me for my objectivity and understanding that, and he said something to the effect, "You were the first objective Dodger Talk show host we had, and I'll always remember it, and we know you love the Dodgers, and please stay in touch." And every year he sent us Christmas gifts and Christmas cards, things like that. So I've stayed in tight with Peter and whatever, and it was quite a year, 1988.
Well, the way I remember it was in 1987, the Dodgers finished like 15 or 16 games below 500 for the second straight year. And also that, if I'm not mistaken, that was the year that, I could be wrong about this, you can help me out here, isn't that the year that Al Campanis got into the hot water on Nightline?
He got in hot water on my birthday, April 6, 1987. Yes, you are 100%.
Okay, right. So I got the year right. So the Dodgers had to let him go. They just had to.
Well, Paul, what he said was on Ted Koppel's show was that Ted asked him why there isn't more African-American management in baseball, and he said they don't have the necessities. And I knew Al a little bit. I know his grandson Jimmy a little bit, and also played Major League Baseball. Al was not a racist. Al meant to say experience, and instead he said necessity, and based on that he got fired. And they went back to talk to the Dodgers from the 50s and the 60s and the 70s because Al had worked that long in the organization.
Yeah.
And all the black players came to his side. So still, the Dodgers had to make that move because we live in a world of political correctness, and so the Dodgers made the move, and Fred Clare became the GM.
Right. Fred Clare became the GM. Now, in my, thinking about that, like this is, we're talking 30 years ago, 31 years ago to be exact. I was young, and I understood. I wasn't young enough. I wasn't too young, T-O-O young, to realize that the Dodgers had to let Campanis go. They just had to. But I was stunned when they named Clare the general manager. do you normally take a guy from public relations and a former newspaperman and make him general manager? I later read, I didn't read this back in 1987 or 1988, but many years later I read that Peter O'Malley actually got in touch with the New York Mets and asked permission to speak to Al Harrison, who was the assistant general manager for the Mets, and the Mets turned them down. They wouldn't allow him to interview Harrison. So Peter O'Malley, I don't know if it was a knee-jerk reaction or what, but he asked Fred Clare to become the general manager, and I think it was it wasn't in writing, but I believe it was an understanding like he was the interim general manager. Am I correct, or am I off base here?
I am not 100% certain if he had signed a long-term or just an interim type thing. But let me state this: I know Peter O'Malley a little bit. He's a very loyal person, and Fred Clare was very loyal to the Dodgers for a long time after he left the newspapers. And your point well taken. Usually PR guys don't become general managers. Usually assistant general managers, as you indicated, become general managers. But Peter's a loyal guy, and Fred was loyal to him. And again, the miracle of '88 occurred. So the next season. So Peter was thrilled. Fred's thrilled. Tommy Lasorda was thrilled, and it was again quite a season. Fred and Fred Clare is a very sharp guy in that he knew the players, he knew everything, and he knew you had to get guys in that dugout that just weren't just players, but were maybe clubhouse guys like Gibson and Mickey Hatcher and people like that who made a difference. So I didn't go in the clubhouse every night because, again, I didn't really want to get to be friendly with a lot of the guys because then you can't really. It's harder to speak the truth on the air. But the times I've went in there, Hatcher and Gibson were the team leaders. They were the guys that motivated. Hatcher wasn't that physically talented, but he hit a big home run in one of the World Series games of '88, and Tommy made him. Tommy said on Monday night, and we'll talk about the affair in a few minutes. Tommy said he was my favorite player of all time, Mickey Hatcher.
Holy cow!
Yeah,
that's cool. that really is. If you said, Peter, guess who Tommy Lasorda's favorite player of all time was, I don't think I would say Mickey Hatcher in the first 100 guesses. That's why I think that's very cool. I like that.
Yeah,
I like it. That's cool. Did you travel with the team, or you just stayed in L.A.?
Okay, so I traveled in spring training. Did not travel on the road. Asked to travel to meet Ronald Reagan, but I hated Ronald Reagan, so I didn't go. Sunahan did, but they offered me to go, and that was very sweet of them. But I wasn't. I just didn't. I had no reason to meet Ronald Reagan.
Yeah, well, you know what? We're going to keep politics out of the show, but I wouldn't have gone either. I would have stayed home with you. Peter O'Malley. Let's talk a little bit about Peter O'Malley since you know him. When Walter O'Malley gave over the reins, so to speak, to his son, was he doing that out of family love or whatever, or did he actually know that Peter O'Malley could do that job? Well, it turned out he could do the job, but I guess what I'm asking you is, how did Walter O'Malley know that Peter O'Malley was actually going to be able to handle the job? And before you answer that question, it's quite evident in New York City when Fred Wilpon offered a similar type of position to his son, Jeff Wilpon. It didn't work out at all. It worked out a big fat zero Jeff Wilpon is a zero. That's subjective. That's my opinion. But how did Walter know that Peter could handle the job, or didn't he know?
He knew. Peter had been hanging around, and he had I don't know what his position was called, but he certainly knew the players and had something to talk to Walter when they made deals or anything like that with Buzzy Bavasi or Campanis. And now Peter had been involved with it his entire life. And his nephew is now one of the owners of in Tom Seidler, one of the owners of the San Diego Padres. So
yes,
is not as high percentage owner, but also a part owner of the Padres. So it's baseball through and through as far as the O'Malleys are concerned. And folks, listen, I didn't know Walter O'Malley, and I've read all the stories. I honestly, just like Peter, read all the books. And the Brooklyn fans will never forgive Walter O'Malley, but
never. Let
me tell you, his son Peter, to me, there could not have been a nicer human being. There is not a nicer human being.
That's nice to hear. That's nice to hear. I'm glad to hear that.
I was standing.
Peter O'Malley was, you said about 10 minutes ago, and I let it pass because we were talking about something else. You said he was forced to sell the Dodgers because of taxes or something. Could you explain that a little bit better?
Well, obviously, he was getting up there in age, and God forbid he had passed away. There's, a 40% tax on anything that you own. So, he had to sell the team to somebody, and he sold it to Fox, who sold it to the McCourts, who sold it to the Guggenheims, and I'll take the O'Malleys anytime over the following three. No, but it was a tax thing where he wanted to make sure that his kids and grandkids were taken care of forever, and so in '98 he did sell the club.
But then, didn't he, correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm 3,000 miles away from this here in the New York City area, didn't he almost immediately, I read in a few different places, I can't remember where, but I heard whispers and rumors, and I'm a big baseball fan, and I heard rumors that he almost regretted it as soon as he did it, Peter O'Malley's selling of the Dodgers, and tried to actually buy them back.
Okay, so Peter didn't tell me this, but somebody that knew him closely told me that he did regret it, and I think part of the reason he regretted it is right away they dealt away Mike Piazza. And, he had, there's certain players, like maybe Kershaw, hopefully, in this organization, stays a Dodger forever. I think Mike Piazza was like the godson of Tommy Lasorda.
Right.
And he was like the 600th pick in one draft or whatever the case might be. So I think to Peter, that meant something. And right away, he sells the team, and Fox trades Piazza to Florida, and then the rest is history. And of course, they end up.
Now he's in the Hall of Fame wearing a New York Mets hat.
A Mets thing, and I think Peter, he felt the loyalty, and I think he thought sort of that. It's not that Fox promised him, I'm sure, that I won't trade Piazza, but of all the players on the team at that point, you wouldn't think that Piazza would be the guy that you would deal away. And they did, and so the guy that knew Peter told me that he had some regrets, but there was no way to get it back from Fox. Fox was using them on television and whatever, so they weren't gonna sell the club at that point. They thought they knew what they were doing, and we found out 6 or 7 years later that for sure they didn't.
Now, Fred Clare was not involved in the Piazza trade, but yet he was the general manager at the time. How did Fox and who exactly traded Mike Piazza? And how could the trade go through MLB if the general manager is not involved in the trade?
Well, I think Fox sees people from the television side of it, and Fox has the final say. They signed the deal, and Fred found out. He did not know. He found out, and he resigned. And again, as we talked about earlier, Many people, I don't know what he was making, but he was making, I mean, you're a general manager in Dodgers, you're making a lot of money. He resigned, so you got to give him credit. I mean, that's something that a lot of people would not have done. They would have accepted the dough, but the trade went through, and as you said, the rest is history, and Florida to the Mets and the Hall of Fame for Mike Piazza.
Weird. Tell me a little bit about, was it last weekend, about this Fred Claire golf bonanza or whatever? Explain it better than I can't explain it at all. I just fumbled the ball, but tell us about that.
Folks, we're taping this on Wednesday, August 22nd, and it was Monday, August 20th, and it was at the Oakmont Country Club in Glendale, California, and the donations all went to the City of Hope. About 2 years ago, Fred Claire had a little pimple on his lip, and he didn't think it was anything, but he went to the skin doctor, and then he said, uh-oh, and it's some kind of carcinoma, and went to his jaw, and he needed a lot of chemotherapy, radiation, and he went to the City of Hope, and they took care of him, as they do. They, take care of people, and so he's grateful. And last year was the first annual Celebration of Life, and this year was the second annual Celebration of Life. And so he invited me and my wife Sandy, and we had a great time. And I'll be honest with you, Peter. I live here in Southern California, but I live at the end of the world, and about 50 miles from Glendale. So for Fred Walin to go 50 miles, I really have to like Fred Claire. I mean, you know what I'm trying to say? I mean, you're lucky to get me to walk to the market 2 blocks away. So, I mean, I'm serious. So, it was 50 miles away. We dropped our Sheltie off at my mother-in-law's house. It took us 2 hours to get there, an hour and a half to get back. But believe me, it was worth it. Some old-time Dodgers, some Dodgers who were on that 88 team, some Dodgers who had left, like Steve Garvey and Steve Yeager and players like that. And you had spokesmen like Ross Porter, who's a longtime Dodger announcer and a longtime local television guy here in Southern California, who I kidded him afterwards. I said, here's my wife, Sandy, who was too young to remember you on Channel 4 here locally, but Sandy, here's a man who for the 10 or 15 years he did Channel 4, he never made a verbal error. And Ross started laughing and he gushing out, oh, that's not true. I said, Ross, it's true, because I tried to catch you. You never made a verbal error, which no other sports guy can ever say. So, anyways, and then, of course, we saw Fred Claire, and I would never ask him, but Sandy says, can we do a picture together? And, of course. And so we did a picture, and then Lasorda, who called me a second guesser for those years when I was doing Dodger Talk, and I always told him I'm a first guesser. I'm not a second guesser, Tommy. And I had Fred Claire on my Sports Byline show about a couple of months ago on Friday night, and the first question I asked him was, Fred, I got a very serious question for you. Now, this is way before you became general manager in 1955, but you think the Dodgers made a mistake in '55 when they sent Lasorda to the minors for Sandy Koufax? And so he broke up, and somebody used that joke at the dais on Monday night, kidding Fred Claire about the same thing. So I guess they had heard the tape or something. But no. So anyways, Fred Claire's battled. He defeated cancer, and it's interesting because I've had a couple kinds of skin cancer. There's 3 kinds, folks. There's basal cell, squamous cell, and melanoma. And melanoma is the most aggressive. I've had the first 2. So when I walk out, and honestly, Peter, even if it's 95 or 100, go out with I cover my arms. Okay,
right.
I wear a hat and I cover my arms. But Fred Claire said something on the radio that anybody listening right here to the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network should take to their heart. Wear lip gloss which covers radiation from the sun. If it's 15 or 25, whatever it is.
I never even thought about that.
That's what I hadn't either. And that's why the next morning, I swear to you, my wife and I drove to, and she does, but my wife Sandy. But the next day we went to Trader Joe's here, not far, and bought a whole slew of lip gloss for my lips, because that's all it started. It only takes, doesn't look like much, I guess, in Fred Clair's case, but went down to his jaw, and it
Holy cow.
very serious. But I'll tell you, he looked great. He's 81 years of age, and
you know what? I saw the photographs. I saw the pictures. He does look great.
He looked fantastic. And Tommy, again, the celebration of life, the honoree was Tommy Lasorda, who'll be 91 next month, and he did a great job up on the dais. And it was just quite an evening, because a lot of old friends that I hadn't seen in years, because I've become sort of as I told you, I don't go that many places. I do my sports byline show from our radio studio in the house. Sandy tries to get me out of the house a lot, but I really don't. And so this was a big kick for me, and it was a great cause, and they made thousands donation-wise to the City of Hope. And, again, Sandy and I, we donate to St. Jude's, which is basically like the City of Hope, St. Jude's in Memphis, Tennessee, where in both cases, if you're a kid and parents don't have any money, they don't take any money. And the only way they can do that, Peter, is through donations. So if anybody's listening, you go to Fred Clair, CLAIRE, golf.com, and you can donate if you are so inclined to the City of Hope. It would be a great cause, and Fred Clair would be happy, and the little kids there would be happy, and you'd be doing a good thing.
Yeah, that's important. That's important. I was happy to see the pictures of Tommy Lasorda. The pictures that I saw of Tommy the last few years were very disheartening to me. He didn't look good at all. But the pictures that I saw that you posted of shaking his hand and him posing with Fred and others, and he looked improved. He looked better. Would you say that he's rallied, or he's gotten a little bit in better shape, or what?
I don't know if I can say that. I think the night inspired him. He was the star. He received the Celebration of Life award. Tommy, has got an ego. Tommy always has an ego. And
sure.
And Tommy also is a funny guy. I mean, he's humorous. So at 91, soon to be 91 in September, he was very humorous up on the dais. He was really funny. He kept everybody in stitches. And he opened up by saying, "Hey, Ross, great interview, but it seems like you think I'm dead." And then he said, "I'm planning to live to 100, so we'll be doing a few more of these." So, I mean, it was again, quite an evening. I met my former compatriot at KMPC, Eric Tracy, who now is doing a bunch of golf. He does golf now. That's his thing. He hosts golf tournaments. That's his big thing. Golf. And anyway, so I met a lot of people that I hadn't seen for years, and 30 years ago past this time. And I was only at KBC 3 years, and so as I told you, for $5,000, I turned them down, and like an idiot. And so 29 years ago, last time I was at KBC, and it's interesting too. How about radio has changed, Peter. When I was at KBC got ratings of 4.7, 4.8, folks, which means of the people that are listening to radio, 4.8% are listening to KBC, and we were like second or third in the market. Okay, now KBC, the same KBC radio, it's got like a 0.1.
Really?
And they're not sports; they're news talk. But even the sports stations in LA have like 0.1, 0.3, and like 0.7.
Why is that, Fred?
Well, this is the question. Okay, in Chicago, the score gets a 7.0 versus, let's compare the highest in LA, which is a .7, the Dodger station. And the score,
right.
which I think is the White Sox or the Cubs, I'm not sure, get a 7.0. 10 times the listening audience in Chicago versus LA. I don't know. Maybe there are more things to do here. I don't know, but they got 10 times the audience of what we have here. So the ratings
sounds out of whack.
Out of whack. Okay, so
yeah.
let me. There's an article in the LA Times. This is off the subject, but it's on radio ratings, which I find astounding. Okay, Pete Arbogast, who's a friend of mine, has been the radio voice off and on for USC, and I'm a UCLA fan, but he's for USC. Pete Arbogast. There was a big front page article a couple of Sundays ago in the LA Times. Okay, so when I think of Pete, I think of his dad, Bob Arbogast, who is one of the great radio guys in the history of Southern California radio. So 50 years ago, I was a mere teenager, and this is no joke now, and he was doing a show with Jack Margolis on radio station in L.A., KLAC, 570 on the dial, okay? They were getting a rating of 14.
Damn.
I'm going to repeat that, folks. I mean, 14% of the people listening to radio were listening to one radio station, Bob Arbogast and Jack Margolis. So things have changed. That's all I can tell you. There's so many more ways to listen and to watch and things like that. But 14, we had it was 50 years ago in the Vietnam War, and we had a demonstration in favor of, because both of them were against the war, and so I just got my license, and so I drive there to watch it, and I meet Bob Arbogast, and then years later, of course, when Pete and I meet, and then I meet Bob all the time. Anyway, there was sort of an interesting get-together at that point, and a great article on Pete Arbogast, who does a great job doing USC football here in Southern California. But a 14 rating, Peter.
Yeah, wow. I mean, that's unheard of, right?
You're in New York, or what? I mean, I will bet you WFAN doesn't even get a 5 or 6, maybe a 5 or a 6 or something like that.
Now, after I get off the air, I'm going to have to go look that up. I wonder what they do get. I don't know. It'd be interesting to look it up, though.
It's all changed. I mean, there's more TV. Obviously, there's more.
Oh, certainly it is. It is, yeah.
It's all different.
I guess when I do look it up, if it is a 5 or a 6, that's pretty damn good, right?
Oh yeah, certainly compared to Los Angeles.
yeah. Well, before we call it a night, I think we would be remiss if we didn't at least mention, in passing, minimally, the 2018 iteration of the Bums, the Dodgers. They are on the doorstep of being swept by a mediocre Cardinal team tonight at home. What are your feelings about the Dodgers?
All right. First of all, the Cardinals are on a good streak, but the shocking thing I found out last night, one of the rare games that I could get to see legally here, because it was on ESPN too. Usually they black everything out here. I can get it illegally, but anyway, they got it legally. The Cardinals, as of last night, had made 96 errors, which I think tied them with Philadelphia for the worst in the National League. And historically, I think you'll vouch for this, Peter. If you think of the Cardinals, it's always the Cardinals' way of playing baseball.
Right.
You just wouldn't think of the Cardinals as being a bad defensive club ever. And they made 96 errors as of last night. But I tell you, they're on a streak, and they've got a couple of really fine young pitchers. Miklos just had a baby and pitched that night, I think, and went like 6 or 7, struck out like 10 or 11, and did a great job. Tonight they're going with another young hurler, John Flattery, who's done a real good job for them. So they have some young, talented pitchers that could make the difference. As far as the Dodgers are concerned, I think if you'd have told me a month ago, I would say the Dodgers would have won that division by 4 or 5 games. But then Jansen has a heart problem, and they blew 3 or 4 games because Jansen wasn't there. Now
Exactly.
he's back, and last night, Tuesday night, he gave up 2 home runs in the 9th inning. They go down 5-2 to the Cardinals. I mean, how do you know he's 100%? How do you know how long will it take him to be 100%? And more importantly, should he be pitching with a bad heart anyways? Because he said right after the season he's going to have his second heart operation. So, as a Dodger fan, you want
that's horrible.
To his health. And,
sure.
I mean, so if you anyway, when they wrote that he was going to have another heart operation, I assumed he was going to be out for the rest of the season. But they actually have brought him back, and God forbid if something happens, he's got a overactive heart and vibrations and all this. And I'm not a doctor, but that doesn't sound good. And he did have an operation, I think, in 2012. So it's not something that is a novel thing to him. So the question would be, do you want him pitching? I mean, even though it means you're not going to win the division, do you want him taking a chance and maybe gambling on, something bad happening? And
yeah, God forbid something devastating happens. I'll tell you what, if they get into the postseason and a game has to be played in Denver against the Rockies,
I wouldn't bring him.
He can't go.
I agree.
Jansen cannot make that trip.
Nope.
They can't allow him to go.
Nope. And he
because of the altitude.
I want to go, but they would have to put their foot down because.
Sorry, you got to stay home. You couldn't tempt the hand of fate like that. That would be tempting the hand of fate. One more thing before we give it up tonight. I'm sure you've read this. The Washington Nationals placed Bryce Harper on irrevocable waivers, and he was grabbed by the Los Angeles Dodgers and then pulled back. Do you think that the Dodgers claimed him to block him from going to Arizona or Colorado or wherever, Cubs or wherever, or do you think that they had legitimate interest in Bryce Harper?
No chance. The one thing they do have would be 5 or 6 outfielders. Absolutely no chance for being real about that. No chance. They were just doing it to block the teams ahead of them in Colorado and Arizona. Not that they would even. I mean, again, we're talking, folks, a rental. It's August. We do this. It's August 22, so we're talking like 6 weeks of the baseball season. And no, you're not going to give up much of your farm system for somebody for 6 weeks. I'm sorry. I just because I don't know where he wants to go. Of course, he's from here, but the question right now for the Dodgers would be Dozier and Machado, and they got enough money trying to save money with those two. They're not adding a third headache. I mean, as far as financially, I mean, he's fun to watch at the All-Star game. He was the kick, and he seems to be ecstatic about baseball, and that's great. And he obviously play a lot of positions because he was a catcher here originally, and but no, I just based on the Dodger history since the Guggenheims have taken over, there is no. In my mind, there's no chance of them spending. I would keep Machado now if they have him. Again, he's been off and on hitting wise, but if he's happy playing, and I don't know where you play him, but that's the only question. Seager's coming back. Seager's an awfully good player. Turner's coming back. He's an awfully good player, although injury prone. So Machado wants to be a shortstop. I don't know if Seager wants to be a third baseman, and I don't know if Turner. They just signed Turner to a 4-year, $64 million contract last off season. So they're not going to, so if they deal him, they're going to have to. Some other team's going to ask for money from the Dodgers to take him, even though he's very talented, but he's injury prone. So I don't know what the answer is, but, as a Dodger fan with Machado in that lineup, and if I'm playing against him, that scares me because it adds a lot of power to a team that has already shown they have a lot of power. And a few weeks ago, Rob, you and I talked about Ron, you and I talked about how many guys would hit 20 home runs on his team. I don't know. I mean, it's going to be 6 or 7, or Peterson's got 17. Is he going to hit 3 more by the end of the season? Perhaps. I mean, they already have 3 or 4 guys over the 20 or right at the 20. So this is a fun team to watch. But Machado adds something extra. I mean, he's a real good defensive third baseman, an average defensive shortstop, and so much power that it's hard to give him up. So as a Dodger fan, I hope they find a way to keep him. I don't know where they're going to play him, but that would be Dave Roberts' decision, but really management decision. And folks, before we leave, Peter, let me just tell you this. A lot of the local newspapers here are basically writing that if the Dodgers don't win the division or get in the playoffs or do something in the playoffs, is it the last year for Dave Roberts? What do you think?
I'm not so sure about that because nowadays managers such as Dave Roberts are pretty safe, I would say, because Dave Roberts is not the kind of guy who would go into a meeting. He doesn't strike me as this. Now, I don't know him. I never met him. I never will meet him. I never will get to know him. I don't know. I'll read his book after he retires, I guess. But all I know is this. Dave Roberts does not strike me as the type of guy that goes into a meeting and says, listen, I'm the boss. I'm going to make the lineup out. Nobody's going to tell me what to do. Nobody's going to tell me who to play. Nobody's going to tell me. He's not a Whitey Herzog. He's not a Bobby Valentine. He's more of a corporate guy. And I don't dislike him, Roberts, but I do think that he takes his direction from elsewhere. I think that the front office calls many of the shots. I think they call the lineups. I think they call what they want to see, what type of baseball they want to see, and when they want to see it. And I don't know if you saw the uptick in stolen bases and bunts about 10 days ago, 14 days ago. I think there was a front office stipulation on that. Roberts is probably safe. And the reason I say he's safe is because he gets along with the guys, or seems to. They like him, the guys, or they seem to. And he listens to the front office. And he does what the front office tells him to do. If Dave Roberts had a set of balls, a month ago he would have said, wherever you send Pedro Baez, do it tonight, because I'm never using him again, and I'm playing with 24 men. Okay? That's just one thing. But I think he's safe. I think if the Dodgers don't make it, there'll be a lot of posturing. There'll be a lot of this and that. Oh, my God. Some people will call for Roberts' neck. But you know what? When you load the bases with nobody out, and then you load the bases the next inning with 1 out, and then you have second and third with no outs, then you have second and third with 1 out, and you don't score a fucking run until the Cardinal pitcher throws the ball into center field, that's an offense. It's not Dave Roberts' fault. They don't hit with men in scoring position. The home runs they hit are by and large solo home runs. They don't, when the bases are jammed with Dodgers, or as Red Barber used to say, the bases are FOB, full of Brooklyn. When the bases are loaded, the Dodgers, I turned to a movie. I turned to a comedian show on the other channel. I know they're not going to score. It's a joke. They don't even put the ball in play. The guy strikes out for the first out. The next guy pops up. The next guy hits a 395-foot line drive to left center field that's caught. Where the hell was that when there was nobody out or 1 out? They just don't produce. So I think Roberts is safe. Not his fault.
I think he could be right. I think the major focus should be on the front office because, again, nobody knew that Jansen was going to get the hard helmet or have the hard helmet returned, but you got to get a second reliever, at least for the eighth inning, and then that guy could go to the ninth inning because they blew 3 or 4 games consecutively because.
Yeah, I heard Friedman's. Fred, you're absolutely right. You're 100% right. He should have gotten a couple of relievers, not just one, but a couple. And the reason he didn't, Friedman explained it this way. This is the way he explained it. It sounds like he should be working for Trump. Okay. He said, we set the bar very, very high in looking for relievers, and when we couldn't get the guy or the guys, plural, that we wanted, instead of settling, we went for offense to try to outscore the other team. And that's why we got Dozier and Machado. Now, that's double talk if I ever heard it.
Well, I'm not sure San Diego would have dealt Brad Hand, but there were others out there that, in my mind, could have pitched the eighth inning and then become ninth inning relievers when Jansen got hurt, with his hard helmet. I challenge anybody out there to tell me some of the names of the Dodger 6th and 7th and 8th inning guys. That's all I'm trying to say. In the past, you knew their names. You don't know their names because they're trying to, they're trying to make up with names or a lot of guys for real talented guys, and I'm not sure they have a lot of talented guys in the bullpen. So again, let's say they make the playoffs, and let's say Jansen's not 100%. Mm-hmm. They got problems because
big problems.
And even if Jansen is 100%, other than Kershaw, who they'll let go 7 once in a while, most of the time they're pulling their pitchers after 6. You got to get through the 7th and the 8th, and the Yankees don't have to worry about that. Other teams don't have to worry about that. The Dodgers have to worry about that, and that goes, I think, on Zahid and Friedman, who believe they are the smartest people in the room, and
yeah, they do.
I don't believe they
are. They do believe that, and if you don't believe them, just ask them again. They'll tell you again.
Just ask them again. They'll tell you, we're the smartest guys in the room. And
exactly. Exactly. That's what they'll do. And we'll keep a good thought. We'll keep rooting. We're both baseball fans. We both follow the team. We'll be listening. We'll be watching. We'll be reading. We'll be rooting. But thanks for a great show, Fred Walin. I'm talking with Fred Walin. And this is Comfortably Zone Radio. You're listening to A Tale of Two Cities from Brooklyn to Los Angeles. It's all about Dodgers baseball. Thank you, Fred. Thank you very much. Stay cool out there in the hot weather. And I'll talk to you next week, okay?
And Ronnie will be back, I hope.
Ronnie will be back, I hope.
Talk to you guys. Bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.